So Barry, a couple episodes ago, we announced this partnership that we're doing starting this year with this really great company, AEP Connections. And I see that we've added quite a few listeners since then. So do you want to give us a little bit of a refresher here, give our listeners a refresher on AEP Connections, who they are, and why we're partnering with them?
Yes, AEP Connections hosts live webinars. I've actually done some work with them, and it's always high-quality topics in neurodiversity. But they're building a library of on-demand courses now. And this summer, they're focusing on providing you with fantastic content at your fingertips. They have courses designed specifically for on-demand with many speakers on many important topics. However, many of their live presentations from this spring are also being made available for on-demand, so you can access them now. If you aren't able to see the courses live, be sure to check them out over the summer. Also, if you need approved provider hours, and it's really important for things such as licensure, they offer many, so be sure to check out the different courses and see the approvals from so many professional agencies.
Absolutely. I know, from Kristen's point of view, I always was hearing about, I'm as an SLP, I need more hours. I need more, professional development, and it's great. It's good to be on top of your craft in that way. So if anybody's looking for some discounts on professional development, AEP Connections, they actually have a few options. So they've got bundled packages, which will, save you money, but also by being a friend of Uniquely Human, the podcast, and AEP Connections, they are extending an additional discount code. So you can save an additional 10% on this offering just by entering the promo code UH10. That's UH10 in your checkout cart. Any topics that we should be aware of, Barry, that you're doing, for instance, that I should be signing up for?
Sure, yeah. And we're talking about Gestalt language processing. We talk about neurodiversity and issues related to that, but there are many other speakers as well. And it's a real cool perk that you get the 10% discount if you put UH10 or UH10 in your checkout cart. Check them out.
Awesome. The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
I described that in the introduction to Neurotribes as the inception for me getting involved in autism. We were sitting feet away from where a woman blurted out in the year 2000, "Oh my God, there's an epidemic of autism in Silicon Valley," which there wasn't, by the way. Right. There wasn't.
Geeks everywhere.
Right. But I spent the next, 20 years of my life or whatever, like figuring out what was right and what was wrong about her comment.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity. Hey, Dave, we've been talking about this episode for a long time, and I think we're both really excited to be able to reflect on both the 10th anniversary of Uniquely Human, but more importantly, our focus today is the wonderful relationship that we developed with Steve Silberman, author of Neurotribes, over the years.
Absolutely. And, by the way, I always link Steve Silberman and Suspenders. For all of his great body of work, when I think of Steve, I immediately imagine Suspenders and that huge smile of his that just lights up, the darkest room. So I don't have suspenders, but in honor of Steve, I got some bananas here, and I thought I could wear these as makeshift suspenders. So there we go. And we'll use this for social media.
And Steve would totally appreciate that.
I think he would.
We thought it would be a lot of fun to go back and bring Steve's voice back with us, because Steve has not left us. He is with us. And really begin to listen a little bit to some time we shared with him well over 3 years ago as the third guest on Uniquely Human, the podcast.
Absolutely. And it was, I mean, you'll hear it as we go through the episode, and we're pulling out clips from that interview, but you will hear just the immense joy and the real gravity all in the same voice. It's just, we're talking about very important stuff, but we're doing it in that way that Steve and you both make it so accessible to people.
Yes. So let's go to 3.5 years ago and listen a little bit to our podcast.
Dude, Steve Silberman, right? Man of 1,000 S's, suspenders, smiles, sarcasm, scientifically savvy, sublime, sweet, sincere, sitting on Zoom waiting for me to get on with it. Steve, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. We all love Neurotribes, obviously, which I feel is something of a companion book to Uniquely Human, if for no other reason than you can't put either one of these books down once you start reading them.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I'm very honored to be with Barry. And it's funny that you described Neurotribes as a companion book to Uniquely Human. What happened when I saw Barry's book was that I said to myself, oh my God, I wrote the history, and then Barry, from the front lines of working with autistic people and their families, wrote the applied history, in a sense. Like the lessons that could be gleaned from autism history in Neurotribes were applied by Barry in real life,
What a privilege it was. This was the beginning of a long friendship as well as a professional relationship. And it wasn't just Dave or some readers who thought, wait a second, these seem to go together. We actually had some professional reviews that brought us together just a month after publication. And that was in August of 2015 that these reviews came out. One was from Nature magazine. And the quote is something like, 2 books about autism spectrum disorder released this summer look set to be serendipitous companion volumes. Steve Silberman's Neurotribes makes the case that respect for people with autism is long overdue. And then parents, teachers, researchers, and carers eager for a how-to guide on what form that respect should take in the home, clinic, or classroom can turn to Barry Prezant's Uniquely Human for ideas. And then Judy Endow, somebody who we respect tremendously, who's an autistic self-advocate, she came out with a blog that was entitled Uniquely Human Neurotribes. And Judy shared, I'm hoping these 2 books pave the way for society to collectively begin to see that autistics are the experts on what it means to be autistic. Steve and Barry, please team up, get out there and turn the tide. Thank you so very much for counting us already as human and for understanding why the rest of the world most often does not. Do us proud. And Steve and I were so proud to not only see some of the professional literature, but autistic people kind of saying, go at it, guys. There's so much work that needs to be done hand in hand with autistic people.
Yes. First of all, I love that quote or that sentiment that Judy shared in her blog. No pressure, by the way, turn the tide. And saying something like that is obviously a note of encouragement, but what has happened in the last however many years? We're seeing a shift in the tide, and it's because we have voices from everywhere on the spectrum to amplify this message, which we'll get into more and more here as we go.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons that, at least personally, I felt such a strong bond to Steve is his humility. I mean, he's a brilliant man. He's a brilliant science writer. But he made it clear that the most important learning comes from autistic people. So let's listen to Steve on that point.
Yes. I was so engaged in the conversation, I forgot to skip ahead. Okay,
Steve said to me, I want to make it clear, I am not an autism expert. I'm a science writer. And I think I said, I want to make it clear, I'm not an autism expert. I'm not on the spectrum.
Oh, yes, right.
And that was a real bond that we both felt that, and I think it's emulated beautifully in Neurotribes and hopefully in Uniquely Human, that all of our learning comes from autistic people, or the most important learning comes from autistic people.
Okay, so this says it all, and this is something that I have been this is something that I've been saying nonstop since I was first started doing public speaking, when organizations were coming and inviting me to come and speak to their events or whatever, is that we need the full diverse range of perspectives. Like, good literature on autism and neurodiversity is good literature, full stop. It doesn't matter if it's coming. It matters that all voices are included, and it matters a lot that we amplify autistic voices. But great literature about autism that's written by somebody who does not have an autism diagnosis is still great literature and still very meaningful and important.
And I think we've really walked the walk with Uniquely Human, the podcast, because we were saying this up front, you and I and Steve, that the most important learning comes from autistic people. And 120 some odd episodes later, half of our guests are autistic and neurodivergent. And we learn so much by having the privilege of meeting and chatting with some of these people.
100%. And I will submit that, at the risk of doing any kind of armchair diagnosis, which I would never do, of the half that were not autistic, 25% probably were. But that's conjecture. That means nothing, and I won't say which 25%.
So I think it's really eye-opening how Steve got started, and that was hanging out with autistic people. So let's listen to what Steve spoke about.
It was really by hanging out with autistic people, which I did very early on in the research process, because Ari Ne'eman, the founder of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, invited me to an autistic retreat called Autreat, run by autistic people for autistic people. That experience was like a mental shower that washed away all these myths and misconceptions that I had about autistic people. And I remember a very distinct moment when I came back home afterwards. I was sitting in this chair. I was, starting to write for Neurotribes, and I'm like describing autism clinically. And I just stopped myself and I said, Steve, you were just with these people for, a week. They're funny. They're complex. They're different from each other. They're fully human. They have more to communicate than the world can imagine. Don't write about them this way. And so that was the turning point, when what I tried to do as an author was to strive to understand the perspectives and insights of autistic people rather than just writing about their behavior.
Dave, another point of bonding with Steve for me was when he did his research as a science writer in Neurotribes. He spoke about some of the early days of applied behavior analysis, and Lovaas in particular. And so many of our listeners know, because you've heard me say it, that my doctoral dissertation directly challenged Lovaas back in the 70s. So this was another aspect of our bonding. So let's listen to Steve talk about this a bit.
By the way, this is why we do a podcast together, is because I love that back in the 70s you were punching up against the establishment. That's so awesome. All right, I'll play the audio. Hang on.
If you read the earlier, if you read stuff by like Ivar Lovaas, who founded, ABA more or less, or, applied ABA to autism, it's as if the person in front of him does not have a perspective. He literally says explicitly, autistic people are not really people. You have, quote, you have to build the person. Oh, really? You know, autistic people had been not just erased from history, but erased from even having selves in all the clinical writing about autism. And it was really the experience of hanging out with autistic people that taught me that they not only had a valid perspective, and it wasn't just a constellation of symptoms or a list of deficits, you know, that they had a very human, very complex perspective, just like neurotypicals, deserves just as much respect.
Gosh, you two are like soul twins or like intellectual twins. It's crazy to me that you both saw the same, I'll just say BS, and called it out in such an important way so as to be able to shift the tide. That's just, that's so awesome. I've never done anything that big in my life. Like, no, seriously, how does, I'm not kissing ass. Like, how does that feel to know that what you saw and what somebody like an accomplished science writer like Steve saw, you both went, huh, that isn't right, because I have spent time with these people and I'm challenging all of this nonsense. And now to see that shift, like, how does that feel? Like, how do you stay humble?
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, people talk about meeting somebody of like minds. Yeah. And I think Steve and I had liked hearts. We felt very, very passionate. And it's just, and I know Steve would say this, it's just what he does. And just, it comes out of who he is as a human being. And for me, it was just, you know, learning over so many years with my time with autistic kids and adults and their families. So it was just a natural evolution. It wasn't something that Steve tried to do or I consciously tried to do. It just was our perspective and, you know, just putting forth our beliefs.
Absolutely. I mean, you're showing up and you're doing the work, and these are the results. It's amazing.
One of the important things that Steve really got across was the desire for connection that he observed in autistic people. So let's listen to Steve talking about that a bit.
Desire for connection. You say, Barry, in Uniquely Human, that one of the most important things to do is to seek a connection with the autistic person. Whereas in, you know, half a century of papers before you wrote that book or whatever, the central notion is autistic people don't care about connection. In fact, they shun it, you know, and I knew that wasn't true. I mean, you know, autistic people crave connection, crave romance, crave sex, you know, and in other words, they're human beings. And that was quite unlike the way they were portrayed.
And one of the things that is so wonderful about the honesty of so many autistic people is they're not going to pretend to connect with somebody who is off-putting to them, who doesn't respect them. And you know that right away, whether it's a 3 and 4-year-old or whether it's an adult person. It's like, I don't want you in my space trying to connect with me because you are not doing the things you need to do to show respect and honor me as a person.
And you will hear that honesty faster in the engagement with a 3-year-old. They haven't learned to mask yet.
Exactly. So another point of connection between Steve and I was the early experiences. So Steve talks about going to the Art Treat. He already mentioned that. But it related very closely to my camp experiences when I joined the lived experiences in everyday activities long before we were indoctrinated by the literature.
And I think Steve's experiences, early experiences, and my experiences at summer camp, I mean, I work with people with autism a few years before I was exposed academically to the concept of autism. So the same way that you saw, wait a second, you know, this is violating everything I've read or much of what I read about autism when I spend time with autistic people, I had a number of years of the summer camp experience, and then eventually, when I learned about the label and went to parent meetings, the parent experience. Of course, behaviorism at that time was like this great founding opportunity to save autistic people. And so much of what I read, as you read, in Lovaas and the early, especially radical behavioral literature, it didn't jive with what I was seeing in the kids and in the people.
Right, right.
And I think our naivete going into that and having almost like an ethnographic point of view. Let's understand we don't fully understand, and let's almost be the anthropologists.
Yeah.
But with a respectful eye with the people that we're meeting and spending time with. And then you begin to extract, well, there's a lot of meaning here. And not only that, but you also easily pinpoint what you've read as violations of what you're seeing.
Yeah.
But obviously we've seen change in reality, probably the 7 years that we put our pens down when the books were complete. Yeah. And you speak about the future of neurodiversity in the subtitle of Neurotribes. What changes have you seen, and where do you think we're going?
Well, there have been so many changes that I could practically pick them at random, which is what I'll do. But the one thing I will say up front is this. It's a very dark time in American history right now. And it's a very dark time with coronavirus. It's a dark time with politics in America. At the same time, I take comfort in the fact that the neurodiversity movement has already made significant progress just in the last 5 years and has really changed the way that parents approach autism and has changed the way that young autistic people approach their own autism. One of the most fun things that I've done since Neurotribes has come out is attending meetings by neurodiversity student groups at colleges. The pride and confidence and feeling of safety from bullying, but it's not just like lack of negatives. It's like there's a real positive, community feeling among young people once they get hooked up with the concept of neurodiversity and then hook up with other neurodivergent people. That's going to be a generation of autistic people who don't take shit, basically. They do not listen to the negative predictions and the limiting predictions for what their lives will be. And they are very ambitious for the changes that they seek.
So part of the mission of Neurotribes was to point to the future. And 7 years after Neurotribes was published, what's Steve talking about? He's talking about significant changes that he not only predicted, but he saw as essential to happen for the neurodiversity movement to continue to evolve and mature. Just so important, and he says it right there.
Well, to me, the way that I have changed about my attitude towards autism since 2001, when I first wrote about it, is then I looked at autism as a diagnosis, as a clinical problem, a list of traits or behaviors that these people who have autism struggle with. Now I look at autistic people as what a biologist might call a natural type. They're a form of human life that is different from the neurotypical forms of human life, but that is very distinctive. And I'm sure all of us can attest to the fact that once you hang out with a lot of autistic people, you develop, to appropriate a gay term, you develop autdar. Like gay men can, check each other out in a room and figure out who's gay.
Right.
That's called gaydar.
Yeah.
If you hang out with autistic people enough, believe me, they're not infrequently times when I'm talking to someone I think, this person's on the spectrum. I wonder if they know it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't go overboard. I don't diagnose every geek with autism, I'm actually pretty conservative about that. But there are a lot of autistic people out there. And to me, it's just like a tribe of humanity.
Yeah. Love it.
Wow. Tribe of humanity. Isn't that Steve's gift to the world?
the legacy that you leave when you introduce a brand new idea around something that exists, but you kind of gave it life, nomenclature, meaning, you gave it awareness. I can't imagine a better legacy than that. You know, I wrote 232 pages about how I was a crap husband. You guys are writing all this literature on, you know, things like you said, tribe of humanity, and God bless Steve. That's
Steve was a gift on earth to all of us, and his work continues to be a gift as we move forward. You know, I just wanted to share quickly one of the things I treasure the most. When I first got together with Steve in his neighborhood in San Francisco, it was within a month of our books being published. We had been in touch because we had read pre-publication copies of our books. But he gave me a copy, gifted me a copy of his book. I gifted him a copy of Uniquely Human. And what he wrote, what he inscribed on the title page of Neurotribes was this. He said, "For Barry, my brother in the good fight, with love, Steve Silberman." We're all in the good fight. And hopefully we will continue to look back at Neurotribes and look back at Steve, this wonderful gift of a human being to all of us and to the autism community. And Dave, it's been such an honor to be able to honor Steve and to hear his voice again. We're smiling ear to ear through all of this.
It's just a blanket in cold times. Like, I swear, I respect and adore Steve for different reasons. I respect Steve because I never once heard him open his mouth and disagreed with something he said. It just, everything he said made logical, irrefutable sense to me. I adore Steve, perhaps for a slightly autistic reason. I adore Steve because there's no more melodic voice. There's no more. When Steve talks, it's a symphony playing.
Mm-hmm.
And when he laughs, it's a symphony playing a different piece. It's just, it's music when he talks. And you know, when you get to, if you ever had the chance to hug Steve Silberman and put your foreheads together in a moment of just pure joy, you know how life-changing that is.
Yes. Yeah. And just on a little bit of a lighter note, many of our listeners probably don't know how, maybe I'll use the term playful, Steve was. That I had the chance to hang out with him in New Orleans, at a conference in Connecticut, in his neighborhood in San Francisco. And he's just a delight to be with. And you could tell it in his voice. So in addition to everything we've spoken about as far as his incredible contributions as a scientist and science writer, he was, to be with him just lifted everybody up around him.
Absolutely. Beautiful, Barry. Thank you so much for this opportunity to walk through and honor Steve in this way. And we will continue the legacy, the honor of doing fighting the fight.
Yes. Thank you, Dave.